Back at it again. The State of Football Part 101 edition here on December 21st, 2020. Monday. Wake up, wake up. It's the first of the morning. And to talk some football here and chop it up, fresh out the chop shop, I might say. I've got my blade sharpened as Ric Serritella here in New Jersey, broadcasting live around the universe here on the State of Football, your new home for real football talk in the mornings, alongside John Murphy, my co-host each and every morning, weekdays 9 a.m. Eastern, of course, VP of Personnel for the Toronto Argonauts, and like he is each and every Monday, bright and early, bushy-tailed and bright-eyed when the Buffalo Bills win, circling the wire, back from the airport, I might say. Ralph, were you out there in the airport greeting the Bills?
I wish I could have been, man. That was an incredible sight. 25 years in the making. Buffalo Bills on top of the AFC East, and the Patriots are out of the playoffs.
Yeah.
I mean, can't feel much better on a Monday morning.
Bills Mafia is full throttle, and we'll talk about that for sure. Of course, New England not finishing with a winning record for the first time in 20 years, but more importantly, not making the playoffs for the first time in about 12 years. Was that the Matt Castle 10-6 year? I believe it was. So we'll talk about that. But nowhere to begin better than the showdown between the Chiefs and the Saints. And, of course, John Murphy's down there in New Orleans. John, this was lived up to the hype. Of course, Drew Brees making the start. And some people think this could still be a preview of the Super Bowl. How did you come away from it?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you would understand why if they felt there was no risk, with the medical, that the more he can play, obviously. There were two stretches of the game yesterday, the beginning of the game and the middle part of the game where, he was 0 for 6, twice in the same game. There's not usually a time, came into the game 73.6% completion percentage. So there's not normal times when he misses 6 passes in a game. Right, you got to look at some of the factors of it. Again, it's 2 weeks in a row that the Chiefs have a playoff team that they have down with a chance to probably make it be a blowout. And by the end of the game, we're within one score again. Now, is that a precursor to something that would make Ralph's life extremely pleasing in the future? Because if they do that to the Bills, and the Bills have all their functioning weapons, you could see an interesting end of the game. Because yesterday, Clyde Edwards-Helaire goes out for the Chiefs. But at the end of the game, all 4 receivers on the field for the Saints were on the practice roster last week. So you're not out there playing Michael Thomas and, Traquan Smith and Emmanuel Sanders. You're out there in the third and fourth quarter when you have to score to get back and stay in the game with Juwan Johnson and Lil Jordan Humphrey. This ain't exactly making your fantasy team, day there. So if you play Drew Brees, you're probably out of your fantasy playoffs as much as the Patriots are out of the real playoffs, yesterday. But I think when you just look at the ability for them to at least stay in this game, get Brees healthy through it. You have a winnable game on Christmas against the Vikings. You finish number 2. You're still getting, the 7 seed game, right now that looks like an Arizona or, Chicago, in all likelihood. You should still feel pretty confident, if that's where your life's, at when it becomes the playoff time. Get Drew Brees as many snaps as possible. Try to get this offense in rhythm, add Michael Thomas back, when you get to the playoffs, and then let's see what happens. I thought defensively, in the first half especially, that's about as good as you're going to play against that team. I mean, to hold them to a touchdown and then another one, but you made them drive the field, it wasn't the easiest. It was probably the most difficult touchdown that the Chiefs have scored this year. There on that, on the second touchdown drive of the first half. I mean, if you give them the ball 4, 5, 6 times in a half and you only give up 14, you're probably as good a shape as you could be in, against that Chiefs offense. And they didn't run the ball, so that bounced back. So I would have expected, that the Chiefs were a heavy favorite in my mind the other day. I thought that there was a chance, that there were some things that could be done there. And it's very rare, right? How many times have we seen Sean Payton now lose back-to-back games? How many times have the Saints been a dog at home? Not too often. So, now you got 2 losses, but you have 2 very winnable games. And you have a Packers game this week, which if the Packers have a chance to lose, it would be against the Titans this coming weekend.
Yeah, I still think the Saints are going to be the team to beat here. Ralph, I think at the end of the day, what it comes down to, the big reason why the Chiefs have won 22 of their last 23 games is Patrick Mahomes. He is, unless you have a pocket full of kryptonite, he is the modern-day Superman. And again, you saw 3 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. And even when he plays a bad game, it's a good game.
He's amazing. There's no doubt about it. And I think I don't want to oversimplify anything, but that was the difference again yesterday. You saw an aging Drew Brees who got off to an awful start. I know he's coming off a seriously painful injury, but I don't think you're going to see Drew Brees return to the Drew Brees of old. And I really think that affects the Saints' chances moving forward, where you have a guy like Mahomes for the Chiefs, who's clearly in his prime, an incredibly gifted person athletically, and then on top of the fact he's just a great football player. And then you throw all of those weapons into the equation. I mean, Travis Kelce is arguably one of the best players in the league. Tyreek Hill, I mean, they can beat you so many different ways. I mean, you even look at McCall Hardman, Sammy Watkins. I mean, those are complementary pieces, whereas Sammy Watkins, I know he hasn't lived up to the hype of his career and his fourth overall draft pick status, but still, he could be a number 1 receiver on a lot of teams. The Jets being one of them, I mean, he's just a complementary piece in Kansas City. Their depth on offense is incredible. And I don't even think they're completely healthy on the offensive line either, right? And but it's still like they haven't missed a beat. But then again, you can't contain Mahomes. I mean, the escapability, the elusiveness. I mean, you saw it on some of those plays yesterday. It's just it's jaw-dropping type stuff. It's he's a generational talent, and really, I don't think you have to look much further past. That's why the Chiefs won the game yesterday, and that's why they're probably the Super Bowl favorite in the NFL over anybody.
You would have to imagine so. Here on December 21st, 2020, part 101 of the State of Football. Here, Ric Serritella, John Murphy, Ralph Ventre, chopping it up. Your new home for real football talk in the mornings. And you talk about the depth on that Kansas City offense. Now, Clyde Edwards-Helaire out for the season. He'll be back for the playoffs. But you talk about next man up. Well, hey, Le'Veon Bell, there goes that signing, looking pretty good right now. And both, Edwards-Helaire and Bell not even on the team a year ago. And so you talk about depth. The Chiefs got it. And you talk about Drew Brees. I think this is it. I think this is the end of the line for Drew Brees. I think that was part of the sense of urgency that he felt to need to jump back into the saddle, get that momentum, get that confidence going. And he gave it all he's got, and he's going to ride it out to the end of the season. And I think Drew Brees will be up in the broadcast booth minus the flap jacket next season. But, enjoy these quarterbacks while you can, because Drew Brees, everybody except the Atlanta Falcons enjoying Tom Brady these days. And he pulls another rabbit out of the hat once again yesterday, down 17-0, and back come Brady and the boys and the Bucs sitting down there in Tampa Bay, John.
Yeah, no, it couldn't have been any better, and I'm sure that he wasn't scoreboard watching whatsoever, but they're down. At that time, the Dolphins-Patriots game is kind of in neutral. Then all of a sudden, the Dolphins are winning, and he brings his guys back, and they still are in the playoff hunt, and Belichick is out. Because if that game had kept going the way it was going, and you see how Chicago was playing yesterday, and Arizona, ended up, having a win in the afternoon, boy, a Bucs loss yesterday would have been pretty severe, and pretty damaging to their playoff hopes. So, it's just one more time where, you count it out. And we've been saying, like, hey, everybody expected them kind of, gave them that, they were going to be in that top 3 seed, right? People, especially after that Green Bay game, there would have been a lot of folks thinking at this time, that Tampa would be in 1 and Green Bay might have been, the team in that situation. But you got to look at it and say, now, if you're giving that it's going to be Arizona or Chicago against the 2 seed, so now you're telling me there's a chance the Bucs are going to get the NFC East champion in round 1? Yeah, that might not be a bad road to take, Just saying, if round 1 is that, and round 2, you're going to get the Packers. So really, this could be like a really interesting dynamic to see. How would that club, with all their offense, play against Tampa in January in the cold? Because that could be the matchup where, that we're headed toward in this scenario, right? Because the NFC East took a step back yesterday when you realize that the one team that is currently on the hunt in the NFC East is now suddenly the Cowboys again. So if Dallas is the hottest team in your division, you really know what you're in for at this stage of things. That the Giants have a tough matchup, this week, and then they get the Cowboys, right? So Dallas has Philadelphia and the Giants to finish off. They almost control their destiny as much as anybody else now, in that division. So, it's a tough look because with Haskins, it's a whole different game when he's playing. But you got to say one thing. If they don't trust Haskins whatsoever, then somebody's got to explain to me how that guy threw 60 passes yesterday. I mean, who's coming up with the game plan? I know it's Seattle, but who's coming up with the game plan that you have a guy in there that hasn't played in a month, wasn't on the depth chart for over a month, and suddenly he's in the game and you're letting him throw it 60 times, right? So, I think that's a very interesting dynamic, in what you saw, in a couple of these places yesterday. But again, if we give it to Anthony Lynn on the regular, even though we're big, I love him to death, but, he's come close but no cigar. Again, I would say I do believe he deserves the interview. He deserves consideration. Is this really a much better Falcons team than what we were seeing? Or is it just competitive down the stretch when they weren't competitive? Are we overanalyzing how good or what we think? Because I think if you do this, Matt Rule and Sean Payton, and the Bucs aside, but I mean, the other two in your division, if you're leaving the Falcons as is, and just kind of tinkering a little, I'm happy if I'm in the NFC South and you're telling me you're bringing this staff back with these players and hoping for different results, because all you're getting is a little more competitiveness. But okay, you're up 17-0 and you lose. What's the difference between that and what you were doing early in the season? And you've had some good weeks, but then you play the Saints twice and, you gave up 100 pressures and 13 sacks, in 2 games against the Saints. So, don't want to be Debbie Downer, on what the Falcons have done. It's more competitive, but last time I looked, what did Herm Edwards say? Oh, yeah, you play to win the game, not play to almost and be good enough. And then here's your final little ha-ha for the day. Did you realize that their record since they lost the Super Bowl is exactly the score of it? So they're under 500, now 24-38, I think, since So they were up 24-7. They've only won 24 games total. Kind of, you got to know where you're at. You got to know where you're at as a franchise, and that's not where you want to be at.
Yeah, well, the Bucs take that one, 31-27. Raheem Morris, he's going to be available for somebody, and I'm not sure he gets a head coaching job, but he won't be on that staff because they're not going to want him looking over their shoulder, whoever jumps on board. All right, Ralph, we made you wait. We're talking NFL around the league here on the State of Football. Ric Serritella, John Murphy, Ralph Ventre, chopping it up here with you. Weekdays, 9 a.m. Eastern, the State of Football, your new home for real football talk in the mornings, brought to you by the NFL DraftBible.com. You got the Bills now. They played Saturday. We'll have updated standings, by the way. I don't know how I did yesterday, but I'm shoveling my way back out of the basement cellar dwellers there, and I tried to capture one with the Broncos and Drew Lock showing some flashes, but not good enough. And as we alluded to at the top of the show and teased our listening audience, the Buffalo Bills clinched the AFC East for the first time since 1995. Ralph, I know you're looking forward to that road trip in Kansas City for the AFC Championship.
Yeah, it's still a long way to get there, but you got to love what you see right now. And I don't want to say I told you so, but going back a number of weeks, right here on the State of Football, you two guys were trying to push this Dolphins narrative about look out for the Dolphins. I don't know.
It's still one game away. It's still one game away.
I believe I told you that the Bills going into that Week 17 matchup against the Dolphins would put their feet up and lay back because they would already have the division in hand. Sure enough, 2 weeks before the end of the season, the Bills lock it up. So, like I said, I don't want to say I told you so, but I told you so, brother. So you just have to love how the Bills are playing right now. Josh Allen is performing at an elite level. There's no other way to say it. And if you looked at this guy during the draft process and you actually had some football IQ and you had a pair of eyes, operational eyes, you could see that this potential was always there. And if you couldn't see that, then you shouldn't be blogging about the draft or doing your rankings because you're lost. I don't want to steal something from Mel Kiper, but he's right. All these people that knock Josh Allen, that's lazy scouting. You're looking at a box score. You're looking at completion percentage. You're not putting any of those numbers in perspective. You're not looking at the fact that his senior year, every other one of his teammates was probably overmatched by the other player on the other side of the ball. And again, you can look at completion percentage, but what type of offense was it? What are the conditions in Laramie, Wyoming? But physically, you could see this guy was gifted. And then I know a guy like you, Rick, you're not a lazy scout. So you would go inside and also try to gauge his personality, the way his teammates react to him, how he's acting when the camera's not on. I know you would go out to a practice and watch him in that environment. But you have, unfortunately, in today's internet age, you have all these folks on Twitter. They just look at numbers. They want their sabermetrics. They think they're geniuses. And that's what you have. That's why they were so wrong on this kid. And too bad for them. And one other note, by the way, can we get that guy off Sunday Night Football, that Nate Silver, 538, whatever he's doing with the prediction probability? I don't need this guy on my TV. Get out of here with this nonsense, okay? But
Wasn't he a fantasy baseball guy? I
think it came from the night of the politics.
Yeah, he's like one of these
Yeah,
you know,
he's protecting
electoral
the
map
polls.
guys. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, let's see what the spread was in,
He's all over the
Tioga
place.
County. And they got this guy doing some football nonsense. Like that. I'm sorry. NBC's pregame. I don't want to derail
Is that
our
him
show
with
here.
the app in the calendar trying to?
Yeah.
Oh, that was that guy. Oh, what a terrible.
Yeah, NBC's
Like the
pregame show
producers
is
sat
terrible,
around
by
and
the
said,
way.
"Hey, let's. This is a good idea." Oh my god, that was cringeworthy. That was pretty bad. I was going to ask you guys about it, but I figured, who the heck is watching this nonsense?
Yeah, it's the equivalent to our weekly times when we have Turner on.
Yeah, but sorry, but that guy just
going back
reminded
to
me of all
Josh
the
Allen
people.
for a second. I did not know. Interesting tidbit. He actually called up Tony Romo to come work with them during the offseason to improve his accuracy this past season, which I had no idea. Tony Romo and Jordan Palmer, I guess, refined his mechanics over the offseason.
Yeah, well, he's been working with Jordan Palmer ever since the draft process. But there was a special, I don't know, maybe it was actually on Sunday Night Football last week when the Bills were featured. They did a segment on Josh Allen and his offseason and his mechanics, and Palmer sets up like 16 different cameras, and they're looking at every little motion and twerk. So obviously it's paying off, but you can tell just the character he has and the physical ability. You have to realize that he's definitely a risk worth taking, and it paid off for the Buffalo Bills. So, but
I tell you, what you just mentioned there, when you go watch that breakdown that Jordan Palmer did, of Josh Allen, of what he was in college, and then what he was doing, and then when they got him, and just see what they worked on and were mechanically able to alter with him, it does tell you that Josh Allen really must not have, that kind of aura of him of, I'm in the NFL, I don't need any help. No one's going to tell me, what to do, because it is a serious adjustment, right? And you can imagine like taking a pitcher on the mound and then telling him, oh, hey, wait a minute, I can refine you, I can change it. It took a lot for, I think a guy like that who's a first round pick, you're already a starting quarterback. You're starting to see signs of success last year with him to go into an offseason and have the willingness to get broken down that way and then rebuilt by these two guys, because they showed you all the like biomechanics behind what was going on with his mechanics and where he was making mistakes, on his throws and the stuff that they worked on. I mean, it's unbelievable that his mechanics are now on rhythm to where every one of his throws, you don't really see as big a gap and difference in what was there before. And a lot of those guys that are working, with young players, they see pushback, from guys that are recruited to major colleges, right? You see pushback, when you get Mark Trestman used to tell us, when he had done that stuff, that, like, hey, the pushback from a college quarterback when he gets to the first week of training for the NFL Combine, and we're trying to play around with their footwork or their mechanics, and you got guys that just mentally, can't handle the idea of changing, what they were doing, and things. So I think it shows you a lot of what Ralph was saying about the character of that kid, and his ability. And I think going and playing at Laramie, and kind of being out there, there is kind of the same as going to Buffalo, and you didn't go to Denver, right? You're up in Buffalo. No one was really paying attention at first, and being able to create that culture. And, if I was Josh Allen the other day, just like the coaching staff or the GM or whatever, and you get off that plane, to me, I hope that he took that all in, because, he's the main reason on the field that those fans feel the way they do, because they have not attached themselves to somebody like that really probably since Jim Kelly.
One thing, just to back up what John's saying before we move on, I think it could be simplified in one sentence, and that's sometimes a little humility will go a long way. And also a player's coachability. That's not an underrated aspect. And I know if you're a draft evaluator, in those interviews, in those conversations, you want to know, is this kid coachable? And obviously there's more that goes into the evaluation process than a kid's completion percentage. That's the bottom line. And but I, like, as I said, you know, he has humility, and it's been a steady improvement every single year. And it's just great to see.
Well, if you remember the head coach up there in Wyoming, Bowles, he came over from North Dakota State, and he would tell anybody and everybody who would listen, hey, this kid's just as good, if not better, than Carson Wentz. And he wasn't blowing smoke. I mean, he said it, he meant it. And, you know, we were high on Allen. I know the year before he had a great supporting cast. Then his final year in college, they were all good. He lost 3 1,000-yard receivers. He lost a 1,000-yard rusher. And shout out to the Bills Mafia in the chat room today. We got Robin up with us. We got DC in the place to be. Good to see those guys. One final shot about the Buffalo Bills that I will say that you talked about. Josh Allen did a great job refining his mechanics. The Buffalo Bills have done a great job rebuilding this team. And, you know, this is one of the head coach GM duos that has gotten overlooked on this show. And we talked about kind of this new school mentality of, hey, you hire the head coach first. The head coach kind of recommends the GM. And I thought it was interesting. January of 2017, almost 4 years ago next month, the Bills hired Sean McDermott. And eventually, to his liking, they brought in Brandon Beane. Now, fast forward to today, there was, I think, 2 players on the entire roster still remaining, not even 4 years later. So they've turned the roster upside down. You talk about bringing in your guys. I think it was Jerry Hughes and one other guy.
Maybe the long snapper. I think
the only other
Ferguson, yeah.
The whole entire the entire thing. So when you say we're gonna blow this thing up, I mean they did it, and they did good with it. So,
but it shows you how important the draft is too, because they hit on a lot of draft picks. And their first year, actually, before Brandon Beane was in the fold, McDermott was running that draft that first year, and they could have had Mahomes. The Chiefs actually traded for the Bills pick at number 10 to get Mahomes. Bills traded back, but what they did when they traded back, they got the capital to move up and get Allen the following year. But with the 27th pick, with the Chiefs pick, they hit on Tre'Davious White. In the 5th round, they hit on a guy, Matt Milano. Tremaine Edmonds on also in the 1st round, along with Josh Allen. And then they've done a nice job of finding some complementary pieces. I don't want to say off the scrap heap, but kind of some of the underrated free agents, or some of the times you're just kicking the tires on a guy, a Vernon Butler, a Darrell Williams, their right tackle this year, who's performing well. And then, to be honest with you, the 2 best signings they probably made, and they took some heat for it. They said they were overpaying for these guys. John Brown and Cole Beasley, 2 professionals, and they're just reliable. There's no excess nonsense with these guys. They just catch the football.
Yeah, well, Cole Beasley at $4.4 million, he's got 950 receiving yards. I can't think of a more valuable bang for your buck free agent signing there.
Yeah,
so.
that was really smart, because you got guys and you put people around Josh Allen early who knew how to do their job. Right? Frank Gore, Cole Beasley, John Brown, hey, he was going to have some accuracy development issues, early in his career. Put guys around them that if he put the ball in their zip code, they were catching it. And then when you think the iron is ready to go make that trade. Don't give him a draft guy that could turn out to be really good, because you could have gotten Justin Jefferson and you still got the same, type of player. But to give him a guy like Diggs right when he was ready to take off, turns out to be what you were looking for. And I think what that you also saw the other day, now maybe it's their O-line finally getting healthy and, kind of feeling themselves, is whether it's that or just the determined effort that Allen is playing so well at quarterback, it's opening the game up. If you run for 180 and can control the clock, you now have a dimension you have not had all season. And the other day, suddenly Josh Allen was not the number 1 or 2 running back, on the roster. Moss started to show you why they drafted him. Singletary had a good afternoon, and that was against, I know they're not with Von Miller and things like that, but you watch, Denver's played really well against the run, and their front seven has played well most of the season for Vic Fangio. So to run for 182 in Denver, in December, I think that's a good sign, to say if you were looking for now who could give Kansas City their best game, I think you would have to say it's Buffalo over Indianapolis, and then everybody else we'll see. But I think Buffalo's the one team there. If they play like that offensively, that's a measurement of how you could at least get that to be a possibility that, like I said, last 2 weeks, 33-27, 32-29. Don't forget the Chiefs were ahead by 2.5, 3 scores in both of those games, and they both come down to being less than 7-point wins, making you think Ralph might need a couple layers, but he might be on his way.
Wow, I think. Go ahead, Ralph.
No, I got a comment on one of the graphics, one of the fonts that our great Sam Serritella had up there a few minutes ago. It mentioned that the Bills hadn't hosted a playoff game since 1996, a loss to the Jaguars. That was Marv Levy's only home playoff loss in his tenure, but I was actually at that game. That was my first ever Bills playoff game. I was up there with my dad, and Jeff Burris returned an interception for a touchdown to put the Bills up 27-20, and I never felt so euphoric as a fan in my life than at that moment. But they wound up losing the game to Mark Brunell. Mike Hollis banks a field goal in off the upright. But I got to give him a shout out anytime I can. The OC for the Jaguars that day was Kevin Gilbride. So I got to give Coach Gilbride a shout out anytime I can. But he was on the winning side that day in Buffalo. A few years earlier, he was on the short side of the greatest comeback of all time. So, but anyway, 1996.
Was that the second round? Was that the second round, Ralph?
No, that was an AFC wildcard game in 96. They played the Jaguars 12:30 p.m. on a Saturday kickoff when they used to have those early wildcard games.
Well, the year before, the reason why I asked, the year before was the Jaguars. I think they upset the Broncos. Right?
Yes, the Jaguars.
Michael Dean Perry didn't get off the field in time with the Jaguars, the penalty, and
2 years in a row, I believe the Jaguars made it to the AFC Championship game. Yeah, they lost to the Patriots, Drew Bledsoe's Patriots. But 96, they definitely went to the championship game.
That's what you're thinking of. They beat the Bills, then they beat the Broncos.
Mark Brunell, Keenan McCardell. What was it? Jimmy Lewis.
Yeah.
I mean,
taking
it's pretty crazy that that's 25 years ago already.
Yeah. Well, quickly here.
Back-to-back games that were 30-27 too.
Man, you guys got the elephant memories. Stay tuned for the Bills memoirs by Ralph Ventre. Ralph, hey, you just spew out the stories. We'll document them and publish them, brother.
Any kind of useless information you need, and I'm your guy, I remember a lot of things that really aren't
Bob
important.
Riley breaking down O-line.
Yeah.
Bob Riley breaking down O-line.
Well,
He's got
I
11
gotta say,
episodes on Kent Hull.
we talked about the Bills. We talked about the Patriots are out of the deal. How about leave it to the Jets? Hey, looking nice and all good for the Trevor Lawrence sweepstakes. And we did it again. I mean, like, what are you doing? I mean, John, if you wake up, are you happy or you're pissed off this morning as a Jets fan?
I think this is why you're a Jets fan. Whatever's meant, can happen, does happen. So the Patriots gets knocked out of the playoffs. You're probably excited about that. You see the Bills win a champion, win a division in the first time, since 1995, so that's got to give you some possibilities to believe it can happen, right? It's a possibility. The Atlanta Braves didn't win the division again, right? So there's a possibility if you're a team in that division that you're kind of seeing a light at the end of the road, right? You see, Tua is playing well as a first-round pick, for them. And the day before you saw Justin Herbert. So you're thinking that could be us unless we don't get the guy. And today, the only person who feels worse than the Jets is Justin Fields. Because now that's on your shoulders instead of Trevor Lawrence's. So
but is that's
today?
But is that a conversation though? Like Trevor Lawrence and Sam Darnold is a conversation. Are we really thinking Fields over Darnold too?
Am I not thinking Zach Wilson? Am I not thinking JT Daniels in the 4th round? Who else over Sam Darnold? I mean, Joe Flacco's played better than Sam Darnold for the most part.
This is true.
I still think it comes down to now, what are you doing with the coaching staff will tell you what you're doing with the quarterback. Because who you are deciding to match with him is going to tell you if that guy interviews and says, yeah, don't worry, I got Darnold, let's go get, are you going to go and get, and the Jets fans will throw themselves off the back of the stadium to say 2 years in a row, you draft Becton and then you draft Sewell and you got 2 all-pro tackles,
Sounds
for the
pretty
next
good
10 years. Type thing. I mean, I don't know how excited, Jet fans would be to say that, you have one real quarterback in this draft, a second guy that's definitely going to be sitting there if you pick 2. So it's kind of going to be the double whammy to say if Jacksonville picks 1 and gets Trevor Lawrence, and you're at 2 and you stick with Darnold, and whoever's behind you then takes Fields in the top 5. Darnold is now going to be not only compared to himself, but he's going to have these 2 guys that Jet fans are going to be watching, real closely to see what you have, there. And I think, the one thing that Fields definitely has is that athleticism and his big arm give you an idea that you could play a Chiefs brand or style offense, the same as, Dakota Watson style offense, and you drafted Mims, you have the beginning, with a left tackle. Is that something that Jets will explore? Because it would be a more exciting up-tempo style offense, than what you were probably going to do with Sam Darnold. So I think now it becomes the coaching staff and, what kind of grade did the Jets front office have on this guy before the season? And what do they see going into it? Because not only are you going to take him, what are you doing with them contractually? Are you leaving it alone? Are you going to let it play out? It's kind of hard to say your eggs are all in on that basket and you don't, do something with him, contractually. So I think Joe Douglas, this is why we gave you the job, and, we'll see what he surrounds himself with. But, it'll be very, very interesting to see because the dynamic of what you could do with a Justin Fields offensively would be different than what you're doing and can do with Sam Darnold. It's really now just becomes a question of what's next at quarterback. And there's a couple of teams. There might be one right down the road in South Jersey on the other side of the border there that has some quarterback questions too.
Great segue. It's almost like you read the rundown this morning. And let's transition. By the way, the Bengals picking third, so if they did trade out of the number 2 spot, they'd probably have to slide back a couple of slots. But you mentioned Philly Dilly. Ralph, suddenly now the Eagles looks like they have a decision to make this offseason. You heard prior to the game reports and rumblings that Carson Wentz wanted out if he wasn't named the starter. By the end of the game, there was new reports that, maybe he'd like to stay. Regardless, Jalen Hurts, 338 yards passing, another 63 rushing, 4 touchdowns on the day. They lose to the Cardinals, who, oh, by the way, out of their 8 wins, 4 of them against the NFC East. They swept the division entirely. But let's focus on Carson Wentz, Jalen Hurts. Where did the Eagles go from here?
Well, I always temper my expectations when it comes to rookie quarterbacks, but wow, Jalen Hurts, man, 2 great games, just thrown right into the fire, and you really have to love what you've seen from him in this small sample size. Then on the other hand, Carson Wentz, I don't really know if I like the way he's responding to this. I think that he's setting this up for a breakup. I think the Eagles are going to move on from him. And I assume they'll roll the dice with Hurts moving forward, give him a chance to develop. I don't know if they're going to seek maybe a free agent veteran number 2 to be behind him. But I think that the Eagles are going to move on, part ways with Carson Wentz. I know that the contract makes it extremely difficult, actually. I think they would get hit with some insane kind of cap number next year if they were to get rid of Wentz. But can you keep him on the bench as a number 2 next year? It doesn't seem like he's at all interested in that. And do you want that present in your locker room?
Yeah, it's amazing the to compare and contrast the way Nick Foles handles things as opposed to how Carson Wentz handles things here. And so that's what you're getting, an immature guy that hasn't, really matured on or off the field. So we'll continue to monitor that. We've got some breaking news here on the State of Football. Breaking news. Flash the sound effects. Where's the graphics? Come on, let's go. You guys had Larry Lee on last week while I was away. Of course, on the chairman committee there for the Detroit Lions, they hired Chris Spielman over the weekend as a special assistant to owner Sheila Ford. And then just this morning, while we were on the air just a few minutes ago, we heard about it. We talked about it. A lot of shakeups in the front office this offseason coming. Well, Carolina Panthers wasting no time here today, John. GM Marty Herney let go. Not the first time that's happened. But again, Matt Rule is now the head coach. Matt Rule is now going to bring in his GM.
Hey, Matt. Hi, Matt. In about 11 minutes, I'm available to talk. In about 11 minutes, Matt. Yeah, you got to say now, you kind of believe that this was going to be what was happening once they had Matt Rule in there. They kept the seat warm, was kind of the nicest way, I think, to put it. It was also the right thing to do. Marty Herney has done a lot of good things for that organization, and I don't think they were going to just, run him out the building in that way. But they do need a restart. They do need somebody that's going to be on the same page as Matt Rule, and you saw them last year draft extensively on the defensive side. Now they need some work on the other side of the ball and to decide, what is Teddy Bridgewater? Is he the guy and that's your investment, for the foreseeable future? Or is there, someone else in this draft, who might be able to contend with him? Also, are you going to be able to maintain and hold on to, Joe Brady? I mean, that's the connection, Rule brought him, that's the connection to Bridgewater. That's the connection to the offense. He's now going to become a popular guy, in terms of how Carolina was playing when everyone was healthy early in the season, and what you were able to do with Bridgewater, this season, for the most part, is going to give folks, some consideration, both NCAA and NFL, for him to be a head coach. So I think, Matt Rule is definitely going to have a say in who gets hired here. That will not be surprising. But it will be one of those things where if you can get back-to-back years, somebody on the same page with him moving forward, you have an aging Tampa Bay team that is all in for a very short period of time this year and maybe next year with Tom Brady. The Falcons going under a number of probably offseason changes, front office and potentially coach. And now strategically, the Saints will have to decide what they're doing financially and otherwise with their roster at year's end. So if you're Carolina, I think you're sitting in a pretty good spot, to say a year from now, you could be challenging. If one of those two teams falls off, you're the closest contender to being, in line there, for things. So I think that becomes a real interesting job. They have an owner that's clearly going to spend money and has the resources to do so. And you have a cleanish salary cap and you have all your draft capital. Suddenly that Carolina job on the table becomes one that'll be very interesting. And again, what will be interesting is something we side mentioned with Larry Lee, but we've talked about on and off the air. Now, a couple of your candidates are in the division. Would you hire somebody in the division if you knew you were allowing, if the NFL was then giving them 2 third-round picks in order to, acquire the services, potentially of one of those guys? And the main guy that you're hearing is Terry Fontenot. And, would the Saints, who are then getting 2 draft picks, for having had Terry and developing him in their, organization, is that something Carolina or Atlanta will look at? Or is that, just kind of conversation piece and not something they're going to be worried about? Because it's not them giving up the picks. It's the NFL awarding those picks to them. And then just quick, the Philadelphia thing is an interesting scenario, which is if you hold tight with everybody, you could trade Jalen Hurts and get maximum value now for him. And because Jalen Hurts is on a rookie contract, you could probably absorb the enormity of making that trade if you found a team, like we mentioned, maybe the Colts with Frank Reich, or, a San Francisco or somebody that might be looking for a franchise quarterback and have the money to take them. You might be able to absorb it without it being a death blow to you if you're then playing Jalen Hurts on a rookie contract. So the Eagles kind of have that same, remember that Cowboys thing where there's a period of time, and Jimmy Johnson explains it, in multiple formats, years later, where they had, Troy Aikman and Steve Walsh, and he almost got teased into trading Aikman and then stuck with Aikman and traded Walsh and got more draft capital. If you're the Eagles and you just hit the reset button and you have Peterson, and Howie Roseman back next year, if you're keeping Carson Wentz, you might be able to turn Jalen Hurts into a first-round pick and something else, right? So it'll be interesting to see which direction the Eagles go here, with their quarterback thing, because it's a much easier trade, to trade Jalen Hurts and get max draft value than trade Carson Wentz and wonder if you just traded somebody else, the top 5 franchise quarterback he used to be, or did you just get yourself leveraged out of a really bad contract and there's no turning back after what you've seen out of that guy on and off the field in the past 2 years?
Well, I'll tell you what, for, a recent Super Bowl team they've had a lot of turnover at that quarterback position, from Sam Bradford to Nick Foles to Carson Wentz to now Jalen Hurts. And, Howie Roseman is going to have a very difficult decision to make this offseason, who, oh, by the way, I just found out the other day, hired John Dorsey as a special advisor. So John Dorsey now working in association with Howie Roseman there in the Eagles front office. And we'll see how that dynamic goes. Another candidate I know that Bills ownership is actually pushing to teams is Leslie Frazier, their defensive coordinator, to be a head coaching candidate. So we'll have more on that tomorrow, of course, with Russell Landy as we break down the college football weekend and take a look inside the NFL front offices. One last nugget for you guys before we get into our Monday Night Football preview. Derrick Henry, now 321 rushing yards away from joining the 2K club. I don't know. The way he's running, he's got a shot. He's got a shot there to join that elusive 2K. I guess who was the last guy? Was it Chris Johnson? CJ 2K was the last guy to do it. So,
haven't been many, right? Just Barry Sanders,
OJ Simpson. I think the Juice did it. I think Jamal Lewis did it.
Dickerson.
Eric Dickerson and Barry Sanders.
So Derrick Henry would be joining some rarefied air. And, of course, interestingly enough, if you look at the numbers, after their 2,000-yard season, Jamal Lewis, Chris Johnson, never again did they ever have a productive season. They just completely broke down. Derrick Henry's built a little bit differently. So we'll see how that scenario plays out. All right, fellas, let's do it. Monday Night Football here on the State of Football. Weekdays, 9 a.m. Eastern. We're live 6 days a week. Don't forget the NFL Draft Tailgate Show. That one is Saturday, 10 a.m. Eastern, brought to you by the NFLDraftBible.com. Stay tuned. We have a new home coming soon, a brand new website, podcasts daily, multiple video streams throughout the day. And, by the way, can't stop, won't stop coverage of the NFL Draft. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at NFL Draft Bible. Ralph Ventre, of course, at NEC Ralph, the co-commissioner of the Northeast Conference there. John Murphy at Draft JM13, vice president of player personnel for Toronto Argonauts there. All right, Monday Night Football. Ralph, Pittsburgh Steelers 11-2 at the Cincinnati Bengals 2-10-1. The Steelers, I believe, 14-point favorites here. Over under set at 40. What do you got for us?
Well, I think the Bengals are down to their third string quarterback, and they probably shouldn't have let Jacob Dolgala go. They probably could have used him right now tonight, but he's on the Patriots practice squad. We'll see. Maybe he'll get some action here in the last couple weeks of the season. I know Patriots are talking about possibly moving to Stidham for this Monday night game, for next week's Monday night game, now that they're eliminated. But as far as tonight goes, the Bengals, like I said, they're down to their third quarterback going up against the Pittsburgh Steelers. This is a perfect, quote-unquote, get-right game for Pittsburgh. Obviously, Pittsburgh hasn't been playing well. You could probably go all the way back to that Dallas game that they barely squeaked out. So they have been, 2 losses in a row. You want to say anything can happen, but I just don't think the Bengals can hang with them tonight with whoever it is, Brandon Allen or whomever they're starting at quarterback tonight. So I think Pittsburgh gets right. They get back on the winning track. That's not to say that that they will win moving forward, because I know Pittsburgh has 2 tough matchups in Week 16 and Week 17. But this should at least stop the bleeding here for now. They get a wounded Bengals team with a subpar quarterback. And I know the Steelers defense has been hit hard with injuries, but if they're anything that they're cracked up to be, they will just be able to suffocate the Bengals tonight.
Coming off that 2-game losing streak after winning the first 11. And how about this? You know, in each of the last 42 seasons, there has been an NFL team that has missed the playoffs the previous year and then has gone on and win a division the next season. And the Pittsburgh Steelers would do just indeed that with the win over the Bengals tonight. Oh, by the way, they've gotten 10 straight wins over the Cincinnati Bengals. I don't see that streak stopping tonight, and I don't see me gaining or picking up any ground on John Murphy.
No, the Bengals, Ryan Finley, and then we'll find out this afternoon, does Kevin Hogan or Kyle Shermer get to be the number 2 quarterback? So that's your choices against the Steelers, which, that's rough at, a rough situation at the moment, and I also think, that's another scenario here, where with Joe Burrow and the severity of that injury and the factor that he may not be back, does that make them keep Zach Taylor for continuity through the offseason, knowing that most of what Burrow's going to have to do is not on the field, during his rehab? Or is this a perfect opportunity, for them to look out on the market and say, okay, who do we really think would do best with Joe Burrow moving forward, there. So, they've been competitive. They certainly showed some signs of life, early in the season. Good draft pick on T. Higgins, who kind of had an up and down, draft grade, from people. But, the offensive line has not taken any steps forward. You saw them trade, Carlos Dunlap. Clearly, it's been the last time that Geno Atkins, has dressed for the Bengals, and I think you'll see a lot of those other guys, right? Dunlap traded. Atkins is probably gone. Gio Bernard could be on his way out. You could also see the end of the, AJ Green relationship with them. So, I think this will be a very different looking Bengals team, moving forward. And we mentioned it, just like, at a lot of other places, when your number 1 rival and chief rival in the division is now 10-4 and is 1 win away from securing a playoff spot, and you are still in the basement where you have now taken the Browns spot from them, right? Because you forget all those Marvin Lewis years, they didn't win anything, but at least they got there. You're now where the Browns were. The Browns are now in the playoffs, and you got the Steelers with Roethlisberger saying, hey, whether they want me or not, I'm coming back next year. I'll be available 2021. So that doesn't make you look like you have any real shot here in the next 2 to 3 years of doing anything other than rebuilding. So if you're the Bengals and you got another top 5 pick, do you have the people in place that you think you want running this team in the near future? Because I would also be one to say, at some point in time, much like the Dallas Cowboys, you might want to just invest in getting yourself a GM. Just saying. Just saying.
And some scouts.
Maybe,
Some scouts.
Maybe. Come on. Still, you got to say there's a time to realize, that what you're doing isn't working. And if you're the Bengals, now would be about as good enough time to figure that out, at 2-10-1. And there's been a lot of double digit, right? I think they said it yesterday, when the Saints closed the gap to 1 score, there's been more double digit comebacks this NFL season than in recent memory. It's going to set a record. This will not be one of them. It may be a double digit deficit.
Yeah.
But this will not be one where there's a comeback happening, whatsoever. So
I think the Bengals would be lucky to score double digits.
Yeah, I think the Steelers can do some things, get themselves on track. But the biggest thing, if you're looking from a Steelers perspective, can you still be creative enough, with your pass rush? And the other thing is you have to establish, we mentioned it, bless you, with the Bills, is that the thing that's come along now recently is fortifying the play of the O-line, D-line, and the run game. The Steelers have had no run game to speak of, and that is something that will catch them. They would be a team right now, if I was looking at who their playoff matchup would be, that I would say could get upset in the first round. They could go into that game with that record and get upset in round one, because you can make some big plays down the field on them if they don't get to you with their pressure, and they're not running the ball, and they're not consistently controlling the line of scrimmage the way that they are. And Big Ben has become more like medium Ben and sometimes check down Ben, and that's not going to cut it all the time, with how they're playing.
Well, they might be looking at a rematch with, by the way, Baltimore Ravens, who are back to running up the scoreboard. But it's unanimous. We all have the Steelers tonight. We'll be back tomorrow, break it all down, of course, with Russell Landy breaking down the college football weekend. We'll dive into the college football playoffs. Notre Dame, really? Yes, we'll talk about that. All that and more on the State of Football tomorrow, 9 a.m. Eastern. Your new home for real football talk in the morning. See you tomorrow, everybody.